Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Playing with Inference, our podcast about the intersection of generative AI and games, and really trying to get past a bit of the hype and into details of the actual space. Today, we're talking a little bit about more of a technical topic, specifically how the two engineering domains of both AI and machine learning games are different, how they're similar, and really how they can be merged, and when you're merging them, what to watch out for as we all embark on this building games with this new emergent technology.
And for the discussion, joining us is Timothy Johnson, CTO of Little Umbrella. His career spans engineering, operation, and CEO roles, being in the past at XGen Studios, Gallium Studios, WB Games, No, You Shut Up Games, IBM, and much more. Little Umbrella was part of Andreessen Horowitz's run and released the famous and popular game Death by AI, probably one of the early examples of a polished GenAI game loop, and got a lot of traction.
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me. Carl and Ramon. So yes, I'm Timothy Johnson, call me Tim. I've been in the games industry for almost 20 years now, starting way back in early aughts, I was moonlighting, I was at IBM, I was moonlighting for Cartoon Network and Adult Swim, and just gone through every version of gaming there is, from web flash games to the advent of mobile games to web games again to PC console, all over the place. And I'm happy to be here.
Web games just keep coming back.
They'll never die. They died the first time because some guy decided the flash wasn't worth it. We don't talk about that.
Yeah. I thought we'd kick off with something of a dumb product guy question. When ChatGPT first came out, people were very quick to really embrace it and see potential applications for games. A modder out there did something that I think all of us started with chatbots to some degree, and he hooked up ChatGPT and 11 Labs with Skyrim and released a Skyrim mod that had NPCs you could talk to forever. And it certainly made headlines, but also I think revealed a lot of technical limitations along the way of that sort of like very initial brute force implementation. I was wondering, as you were looking at this stuff and as you've seen other folks take these very initial implementations, what are the fundamental challenges that you see that really become apparent in these early implementations?
Yeah, great question. And that was in the middle of 23 when that came out, I believe. And to give you a little bit of my bona fides here, I was a CTO at Gallium Studios when that mod came out for Skyrim. Gallium, that was a studio that I started with Will Wright and Lauren Elliott. Will Wright was the founder of Maxis. He created this. He's just a really cool dude. Lauren Elliott, also cool dude. He's a guy who created Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, Where in Time is Carmen Sandiego, and the three of us have been friends forever. And in, I want to say it's end of 18 or early 2019, we created the studio with the idea of let's create a SIM version of yourself. It was the next evolution. Generative AI was not there yet. In 2019, it was mostly just machine learning and doing vector-based approaches, which we can get deeper into on that. So we've been working on this. We've been working with the team over at Replica. We've been working with what was the original OpenAI. There was a split. Now, when you talk about ChatGPT, that is the closed OpenAI. So we were contributing to the Babbage model and to the Curie model. We were contributing back and working with generations. And we've been trying to get generative completions to be in a cool space with really interesting using your memories and all sorts of stuff. And when that mod came out, because ChatGPT came out, it was actually, we were working with them as they built ChatGPT, and a lot of it was like, hey, that's familiar. That showed what we've known for years, or what I already known for years at that point, that LLMs are essentially the mathematical equivalent of the roulette wheel in Vegas. Everyone looks at a roulette wheel. They made so much money because they put that pattern tracking board that shows you it just hit black, it hit red, green, 00, whatever. And people were like, oh, there must be a pattern. The universe does not care that you think there must be a pattern, right? So there isn't one. And LLMs are the exact same way. When you feed input into it, it is hundreds of thousands of branches going through this gigantic graph structure to generate the completion. And you're like, man, that was amazing. It probably has memory. It's probably sentient. And it is rolling the roulette table every time. So in that Skyrim mod, people would talk to NPCs. They would walk away for 2 seconds, come back, and the NPC would act like they just met for the first time. Really exposing the fact that LLMs by themselves, they don't have state. They don't have memory. It's not an intuitive part of that structure. It was really funny to see everyone go, man, this is amazing. Oh, this is lame, all within the same news cycle. And it was like, yeah, I've been been working on that for years.
I think that's an interesting drawback of LLMs in games. However, people are using it in their ways, piggyback or like bold state and memory into those LMs. What are the approaches that people have taken? Like since that Skyrim mod, what has evolved to be the state of the art and how you attach some sort of memory and state into those language models?
Yeah, great question. That was really what we were trying to solve at Gallium. We did it through a mixture of a node-based memory graph and a vectorized database. What is, I think, industry standard right now is what they call RAG. Well, what does it stand for?
Retrieval augmented generation.
There it is. And essentially, it's going to sound like I'm making fun of it. I'm not. But it's really, hey, I have a question. What if I Google it first and then take that response and feed that to the LLM and tell it to say it to me like a pirate? That's what RAG is. It's getting better. There's better. RAG is this shoving a database into the middle. And it's a little bit of a hammer looking for a nail. I think the approaches that I've seen that are most successful are much more of a vectorized set. When I say vectorized, this goes away from LLM generative completions. And this goes back to like just fundamental machine learning, where when you are doing like an embedding or a vector, really you're creating like a spatial alignment of these different pieces, tokens or words or concepts, and being able to spatially see how close they are. Like this was invented back in the late 2000s, I believe, popularized with Word2Vec, if you guys are familiar with, to where apple is here and it's actually really close to banana, and dog and cat are close, but they're really close to pet. And so vectorized databases work like that. And that to me has been like the best way to get good, clean results using LLM to generate based off of the tokens you pulled out of that vectorized database.
If we jump into a bit of the like idea of looking at the combination of the game space and the game engineering space and the sort of LLM space and how these two different engineering domains can and solution sets can really compete with each other, I think solving that like memory and the vector stuff, I think is some really cool development. But at the same time, games have done a lot of like state management for a long time and have definitely developed their own set of systems and their own set of engineering tools to handle that. How have you seen those two systems start to compete with each other? And like, where does that turn into happiness and where does that turn into eternal sadness?
Oh, that's good. I've been in the game industry now long enough to have seen the world turn on its head probably 3 times. I am a humble game maker. I am not some technologist who's always looking for the bleeding edge. I just want to make a fun, entertaining experience. It's cool. Take AI out of it. There's been so many different people trying to redesign the wheel on how state machines work or how behavior trees work. There's always someone who's, I'm going to do it right this time, and someone wants to reinvent the back end. I'm going to date myself here a little bit, but you guys remember the protocol SOAP?
I don't.
The S stood for simple. Okay. SOAP was one of the super complex. Everyone over 50 waved to me. Okay, this is an eternal problem because what you want to do is you want to make yourself a better behavior tree. You want to make yourself a better state machine. If you just throw those techniques away and say, no, we're going to rely on the LLM, we're going to rely on RAG and rely on vectorized databases, you're going to get some really interesting results, but you have to find a way to meet in the middle. And that's what we've done. That's what we did at Gallium, and that's what we're doing 100% at Little Umbrella, is the tried and true game mechanics of being able to have your NPCs know exactly what they're supposed to do, what they're not supposed to be able to do, and then augment it with these things that can be outside of the set. And what I mean by that, in my head, I put a big fine line between what would be like embeddings, more traditional machine learning, where whatever answer you want, it is contained within this box. This box could have 2 things or 1 billion things, but whatever you're looking for, it's in the box. The other side is completions and generative AI, where natural language is going to be spit out. That is an infinite space. You can try to put enough instructions into it or fine-tune your models or switch to a much smaller parameter set. But no matter what, it could be anything. And as a game maker, I can't deal with anything. I need a closed set of things if I want to have a good outcome. Death by AI was a little bit different, where we embraced what if you could have anything as the answer. And that's where it became much more of a party game where you feed it some inputs, it feeds you some outputs, and that output could go anywhere, and that's fine because now the game is over. Like I didn't need that our robot in Death by AI to remember you or remember what it said or to understand what an apple is or that you have one, any of that. So that's in my head, that's the problem space, especially for games, is you want to find ways to get the infinite, but then reel it back in and put it into a set.
I think that's a problem that people who are building a space face all the time. And even, for example, in Death by AI, although like the game AI game master can say anything, the outcomes tend to be very binary. Either you survived or didn't survive. Uh, what do you think? Like all of us are essentially trying to capture as much as we can from this free form, but then in the end, we have to make it a game that is constrained into some game space. What do you think are technical approaches that have worked well in marrying these two, infinite space and the constrained space?
Yeah, that's really good. I don't think there's any like one size fits all deal right now, but in Death by AI, we didn't use any embeddings there. What we did was we trained a very specific model that said, here is what the player said. Here is what the AI said. Did they live or die? And it could give us back, literally just give us back true or false, if they lived or if they died. Sometimes, so basically we would just retry until we got the output we wanted. And then once we hit some threshold, we would just randomly pick true or false. It's just some sort of failsafe and we can talk about scalability because Death by AI, holy cow, we had to do a lot to make that game work with the scale that it hits. But that's one approach, is that fine tune a really specific query into a model and then see if you can get back an exact answer. For me, I'm a big fan of embeddings. Like I'm going to say that over and over again. I love Ada 2 is a really great one, but you can train your own. We partnered at Gallium, we partnered with a company called Numenta, and they have a fantastic inference engine that runs on CPU. It's 1,000 times faster than everything else, created by the guy, the Palm Pilot. Basically, go off, generate some sort of whatever you're going to get back from the LLM, knowing that you're going to get some sort of response, going to give you one of 10 outcomes. Then feed that into the embedding, into the inference engine, and say, okay, here's what it said. Remember, you're always going to get something from the set. So if you're trying to get sentiment analysis, you want to know, is the NPC angry based on this response? And so you've got like maybe 30 or 40 sentiments. And so you feed that in and you just get the highest scoring sentiment back. Is that perfect science? No, but it's way better than just guessing or getting a crazy result. Or potentially an emotion that you were not ready for on the behavior tree side, where it's, unless you're just doing like negative and positive, but if you get back like, you're expecting it to come back as angry, but it comes back as ferocious, and that your code just broke because you weren't expecting that result.
So on double clicking a little bit on that, if you are converting, you're selecting from a menu of options and you're using the LLM to drive some of that result. How do you calibrate it? Because I would imagine when you guys were building and scaling and fine tuning the AI, there's like some level of survivability you want to provide. In the roulette, it's a very tuned chances that are like heavily studied. But often I feel like LMs are black boxy and thus very hard to tune for the game that you have in mind.
Yeah. So in most LLMs, you get like maybe 3 or 4 dials that you can rotate of temperature and frequency penalties and things like that. So what we did is we went through with multiple models, fine-tuned our prompt to try to give us the best result. I think the biggest takeaway for anyone listening is that if you're making a game, everyone's going to forgive it if it screws up. If this is some sort of B2B product or, God forbid, something in the healthcare industry, any error is a terrible error, right? But in games, if it screws up, then it's just funny, especially if it only happens every once in a while. And that's why Death by AI was a party game. Get your friends together, talk smack about each other. Most of the people that answer those questions put other people in the game in the scenarios. You're being attacked by 100 kittens. How do you survive? So I just pushed Carl in front of them, and then I kicked Ramon in the shin, and I ran. And then it's, oh, Tim's really crafty. But then usually it penalizes that as well. Like we put in some of the prompts to be like, if someone's trying to be crafty and sacrifice their friends, make sure they die.
I'm curious. I think at Gem&T, we've obviously, as I think anyone who played in the space, definitely gone back and forth on the like, how do you deal with the infinite? And part of the thing that I've always said is that hallucinations are a feature, not a bug, right? The technical terms, you've basically said the same thing. I'm curious when you think about that, from the technical side and thinking through, okay, we're building our next game. Hallucinations are a feature, not a bug. And we need to test this and we need to understand, when is it a bug? When is it a feature? How do we do it? And I think there's definitely sometimes a desire by engineers. Sorry, all the engineers, I'm talking about you. But sometimes the engineers are like, oh, no, we need to get it. We need to take this probabilistic system and we need to make it a deterministic system, thereby taking out all the value of it. But it's also, to your point, very hard to exist on the other side. So I'm curious, as you're thinking about death by AI and testing it and making sure that it's fun and it's hitting the things and that the hallucinations do land on the level of features, not bugs, how do you, as like the technical leader at Little Umbrella, think about that, guide the team on that, help engineers process that very difficult reality?
No, that's a good one. That's a really good one. There's the line that you have to walk is between the design team and the engineering team on that one, because it really is going to come down to your game design. Let me give you a perfect example of this. So at Gallium, we were building Proxy, and one of the first things I did, this is like pre-pandemic, so late 2019. We had a Discord server, and I decided to, because we were talking about different ways we could build the game interface or whatever, and I was like, we're just talking to the thing. We shove it in Discord, we'll just talk to it. And so we made proxies of Abraham Lincoln, of Mary Curie, of Cleopatra. Basically, proxy was you feed it memories, and then it will just act like it. I know everyone's doing that now, but Will was definitely first out the door with that, because he was trying to do that in Spore, honestly. So we had Abraham Lincoln, and everybody was having a lot of fun talking. And this was a memory, we called it the memory graph, but it was a node-based vectorized database where we'd split everything into concepts: time, location. There was like 7 or 8 different parameters. And the first thing that broke, and this was like the first problem we had, and I'm going back to design on this, is that you would ask Abraham Lincoln, like, hey, how's your wife? And he'd be like, oh, she's been sick lately, but she's good. Mary Todd's fine. And then someone would be like, what do you think about the new iPhone? It's like, oh, Apple really screwed up this time. And it's like, Abraham Lincoln talking about an iPhone. You want it to be, because it's trained on the internet, right? So if you talk about anything, these characters now, they'll have an opinion on an iPhone. And I thought it was funny for Abraham Lincoln to be an Android guy, but the design team wanted it to be a lot more serious. And so the design team was like, no, we can't have this thing hallucinate outside of its domain. And I think we probably spent 70% of the engineering budget for the next couple of years trying to solve that problem. Your game design is going to dictate these decisions. If you're not going to allow it to hallucinate, then you should probably not generate a lot of completions for important stuff. It should only be for the decorations of some flourishes of the character. Style transfer, if you want, all of a sudden you want the character to talk like a pirate. LLMs are great at that. Repeat this back to me like a pirate. They're fantastic. I would say stick to more behavior trees. They're fantastic. The behavior trees can call an LLM, but whatever it gets back, it needs to understand, I didn't get back what I expected, so now that's just a failure state on the tree. Go back up, try again. So yeah, game design, I think, is going to be the real key here to how you ride that line.
I'm also curious on the flip side of this in the downstream. And I think those of us who have ended up taking on the impossible task of shipping a product this early with all this technology have grappled with this. But it's one thing to design stuff, and then it's another to be like, okay, now we have to QA this. And traditionally, going through QA, you always heard about repro steps. Like, how do you reproduce this bug? And the reality is, if it's a bug with responsiveness or a bug with something that sometimes the probabilistic nature of the LLM is going to allow something to happen, you can't really there's no pure repro step. And so I'm curious how you've thought about that so far. And if we take a future looking, how do you see that being something as you're thinking about solving it within your organization, as you're going to go and make more games in the space of thinking through that quality assurance, reproducibility in a probabilistic system?
So we have a new game called The Last Show that we are launching at the end of this month. We're actually demoing it at GDC. So it's going to be in the in-world booth at the Discord booth. I'm giving a talk at Discord right now because we're like in the last mile here, last couple of days of trying to squash the bugs. There's a couple of things that you can do. So the higher your temperature is on the LLMs, the more not random, but the more the less you're going to be able to reproduce those kinds of completions. So if you've got other stuff though, like if you turn your temperatures down to 0 or 0.01, you're telling the LLM you want something that's a lot more deterministic. That's how most of these work anyway. Or at least that's what they say on the box. The idea is that you can system critical completion, make sure that this is a low temperature on a fine-tuned model or a model you've trained completely yourself. That way, especially if you've trained it completely yourself, then what you could do is you can build some tooling to snap a save state right before the completion goes in. Have your game save exactly the state of the game of like it was doing, this is the string input with these temperatures, and then have a tool line both of those up. It's not perfect, but it'll get you a lot closer. So for the last show, that game is 100% all of the state, everything that happens in that game is saved into just one big state file. I can dump the state from that file at any time, and it will tell me exactly what it was doing, what tick it was on, which frame it was on. It'll tell me exactly what the player had done, any inputs it had received. And so that's what we use for QA. And by QA, all of our Discord players who say, hey, it's breaking. And I say, hey, click that question mark in the top right-hand corner of the screen. And that'll just automatically dump the logs to a spot up on the CDN that I can grab. And then I can replay their game. Because we're a small team. I don't really have a big QA department.
Wait, so actually, I think that's an interesting, maybe a biased question here. It sounds like you're using your Discord players as your QA. Do you think that's actually a necessary step if you're doing this type of games due to the nature of how random or probabilistic these models are?
This is a little bit of a commercial for Discord here, but yeah, for us in Discord, absolutely. So with Death by AI, we blew up. We hit 5 million users in the first week. And it's because we launched as a Discord activity. We're one of the first. It wasn't even a year ago. It was middle or end of May last year. And so we hit 5 million players in a week. We hit 10 million by the end of the first month. And we're 20 million by the end of the third month. And now we're way beyond that. So we had to scale the AI systems, which we can talk about that all you want. That was crazy. But what I really love about Discord, as opposed to like mobile game development, a little bit of console, it was really hard to get test groups in console that didn't come into Warner Brothers. But especially mobile, you could get like cohorts and test flight and things like that. But it's really hard to get people to play your game, give you good feedback, where in Discord, they're already gamers. And they expect there to be problems. They're way more forgiving than the EA has all the personas like Sally from Sioux Falls and Mary from Georgia. Like they have all the personas of who's going to like the game and who's going to hate it. Discord is like, you hope they're 13 and they're going to forgive you if it breaks.
You've hinted twice now about the pains of scaling. Do you want to just jump on it? What did you guys have to do to scale Death by AI? What was the computational architecture? What were the trade-offs? What kept you awake at night?
Let me give you some numbers to tell you what we were dealing with. So we didn't know it was going to turn into a viral smash success. It was a proof of concept of our tech stack. We're like, hey, we got this tech stack we think is really cool. Let's make our own game on it and then see what happens. And then we saw what happened. We got rushed by 5 million players in the first week. And in that first week, we burned 20 billion tokens. And that first week, we were also like on target to spend $200,000 a month on the game. So we quickly made a bunch of phone calls, talked to a lot of people, and we started getting fast switching connectors so that we could jump between providers. So we could use N-World, we could use OpenAI, we could use Replicate, we could use just whoever had a deal and was willing to give us a discount because they were wanting that traffic as well. And you're talking about like midnight coding sessions with the whole team trying to figure out if this model is going to give us the same result or in-world models or as the OpenAI models, and quickly fine-tuning. And then the biggest thing for us is that we were generating voice as well. And if you want to talk about expense, that is it right there. Like generate completions all day long. Hell, use GPT-7. I don't care. You want just a slightly quality voice. That's 100x the token. 11 Labs, we burned through all of our credits with them real fast. And In-World was cool. We were able to switch over to them. And we just kept jumping around. And then the last, for anyone who hasn't launched a game yet, it's a generative AI game. No, we didn't know this was coming. It was like one day we're simple, happy game makers. The next, we're literally putting out fires. It's worldwide. Like it is worldwide deployment right away. Luckily, the stack we had built could handle that no problem. But all of the providers, like OpenAI is only available to about 40% of the planet. So if you're using like edge compute networking, which is what we do, if you have an edge that's way outside of what OpenAI communicate with, or if that country just doesn't have good standing with the US, then we had to quickly switch over. So there was like all of these edge and corner cases we had to find out. Of 6 people are in the US, 1 person's in LATAM, 3 of them are in Britain. They're all in the same game because they're all in the same Minecraft Discord. And trying to make sure that scaled properly and was able to hit all the endpoints. And also every language. English is the base, but we were translating into whatever language they were choosing with models. And people knew, they were like, look, I know that you don't speak Farsi. It's speaking Farsi to me. It's terrible, but I'll put up with it because at least you tried. And I think that once again, that just goes to how cool the Discord player base is of being lenient and forgiving to, as long as you try.
Yeah, the language side of it is super interesting. And actually, it happened to be a content creator at the time that we were talking to and showing an early preview of the build. And he had a translator because he felt that he could type in English very well, but he couldn't speak in English very well. So he had a translator there to help with the conversation with us as developers. And then at one point he forgot and just started talking to our game and typing to the game in Portuguese, which we then found out that you could do that and the model handled it fine. We had in the prompts to always respond in English and it would always come back with English, but for the rest of the game, he just typed in Portuguese, which is one of these things where it's like these really cool side benefits of some of these models that then introduce infinitely more problems when you think about the UX. How do you handle this? How do you do this well? But I'm curious, as you've been navigating a worldwide audience and language and stuff, how have you found it working with all of these models, finding which ones work with what languages? I think to your point, the Discord audience is okay with okay translation and not needing the like full on localization. But as we as game makers are thinking about that worldwide audience and providing in languages, where does this give you shortcuts and where does this create more headaches?
Yeah, it all seems like it's a shortcut until you realize, shortcut led right to a brick wall. Like, we've got a multicultural team, so there is a little bit of expertise on a couple of languages on the team. But there's good Urdu models out there. There's just not. So what you do is you listen to your players, try to get surveys in there, trying to get some feedback, try to see at the end of the game the thumbs up, thumbs down things that most AI driven platforms do of, hey, how was that? Was that good? Because you don't really know, so you kind of have to poll the audience a little. Also, just being upfront at the beginning of, hey, we don't know if this is going to work in your language, but hey, we'll try. How about that? I think that being open about it, that this isn't a completed product that's been QA'd or anything for them. Closed captions, I'm cool with that being translated in people's languages because as long as it's like what, the 7 Romance and the 5, we used to have the 13 languages Unicode could handle. As long as it's those, I think closed captions with generating completions are really good. When it comes to UI elements, though, let's not redesign anything here. Let's just use localized graphics and text for. It's a problem that has been solved. Like, I think what AI provides us, which has already been provided for a long time here, because Google Translate's been around forever. But if you want to translate simple UI elements into your lookup table so that like start is presented in all the languages, I say go with that. Don't try to be clever. Don't try to use. This is a tool that has a specific purpose. Don't try to use it everywhere.
Jumping a little bit to a different topic, I'm wondering, obviously, we've all been sitting on the sidelines and watch the speed and pace of how things change in machine learning and generative AI in the tech side and the research side. And every day there's a new model of some kind and a new architecture coming out once a week, if not once a month. And games, while I think are more mature at this point, it's certainly not slow moving either, right? To your point, activities as a thing didn't exist much more than a year ago. And so, as someone who has to sit the bridge of these two fast moving spaces, how do you stay current, balance the amount that you're reading state of the art on machine learning or state of the art on games? How are you coaching your teams and your engineers to do the same? Do you have like machine learning engineers versus game engineers? Like, how do you navigate that space?
That's a good one. It's that struggle is real. It's not a new one either. I remember having a legitimate discussion, like Cartoon Network headquarters at the lunch table, where I was like, "Why does everyone keep talking about Cold Fusion? Was there a breakthrough that I don't know about?" And they're all like, "Have you heard about MySpace? It's all written in Cold Fusion." I'm like, "What?" So it's a long way to say that the struggle is real. It's eternal. Um, for our team, like the majority of our team that are engineers are SaaS developers that were really interested in games. Like I'm the salty dog on the team that's been doing games for a long time. The design artists are also have come from gaming as well. But there's a lot of the games that we're making. We're not really looking to train our own models at the moment. I try to get about 2 hours a week to read up on the trades. I'm subscribed to so many email lists of the future is now. Here's what happened in AI this week. And I won't read all of it. I won't read any of it really until I see something that really catches my eye or a name that I recognize. So I try to stay up that way. But really, it's the game design. If I've got painted myself into a corner technically, design-wise, it's something that doesn't really exist, then I might go out and start looking around and say, okay, who's done something like that? Designing your game for what's available. And then by the time you get done with your development cycle, the world may have changed again and you can design the next game or version 2 of your game or the next content that's coming for it. Because if you always, what's the story behind Duke Nukem Forever? It was like they changed engines like 5 times, right? And the analogy they came up with is that they kept trying to build a castle on the sand, a ship, but the ship is sailing up the river. And so they had to keep tearing down the castle because, oh no, the ships are up the river now. Pick what you can do now. And then hopefully you can get there faster with the tools and everything's speeding up. All the tools are getting faster. So you could have smaller teams and build faster. So answer.
So you mentioned that a lot of in your team, a lot of the people are SaaS. Yourselves seem to be very technical. Do you have people in your team that are more like on the game design? You've highlighted a lot. That's the key. So I wonder if you have game designers or non-technical people. And if so, do you need to build any technical tools for them to actually be productive with these models and bridge the gap? Or how does that interaction look like and how is it different from normal game environments?
Great question. And if I had to sing the praises of anything, it's tools. Fast tools, get the tools, make your tools in-engine. As close to where the actual metal meets the meat as you can. Our design team and our team, they're not very technical. They're technical enough, but they get concepts. But what we've done is just pop up debug menus where you can choose which endpoint you're going to communicate with or choose which model you want to communicate with, change some temperature variables. I try to make everything in my games 100% data-driven. I have a joke on the team that if I have to rebuild something to change a value, then I have failed myself and my country. Everything is 100% data-driven. And so, yeah, you just pass in new JSON or you modify JSON on the fly. We're not doing anything really, like all of our AI usage is about how our bots, like in the last show, it's a game show, and we've got 3 different AI personalities. And each one has its own fine-tuned personality, does exactly what it should in its own tone, its own way, its own voices. It's a very mean-spirited game show, so it makes fun of you all the time. It's like a highly personalized Jackbox, but also if Jackbox had its worst day ever and it's just wanted to make so much fun of you for being a human and being stupid. So there's every one of these, everything that happens in the game, there's some sort of prompt that's going to be driving their behaviors. There's some sort of behavior tree that's going to be driving those prompts. And so exposing the tools to the team so they can just quickly modify things like in parameters and then rerun. As I said, everything's state driven. So like we save every frame of state. It's nice and compressed. But you can roll back at any time. So you can pause the simulation, roll back 100 frames, pre that action, change your parameters, and then replay that action. And so you can see the different outcomes. It's not perfect, but it helps you tune a lot faster.
When you think about setting up those tools, and I think there's tools that help debug and tools that help do the technical logistics, right? Like you mentioned, like, hey, go to this endpoint or go to that endpoint or try it on this model or that model, right? And then there are sort of the tools for non-technical team members that are meant to really help them do what they need to do, right? Help a designer do the design work that they need to do without having to just be always blocked by asking an engineer to go and implement it. So when you think about those two sort of sets of tools, talk us through a little bit like how you think about setting those up, how you think about how and when really you think about building them, and what the sort of like different headspace you're in. Because we work in Unreal, which has a whole bunch of tools built for you, but then all of this generative AI stuff, we had to go and build our own tools. I'm curious for your side on the Discord activity, which is a much more nascent platform, right? Like how you thought about when and where to build the tools for designers to get information to engineers versus how to build tools that let designers not bother the engineers and just do work.
This is an age-old question. This is a good one. I'll give you like my tenets I live by a little bit. The first one is never build the design team or the art team any tools ever until they ask for one. Because if you preempt and you're like, oh, the design team would love this tool, what you did was you just wasted your time. Maybe you learned something about building tools, but if they didn't ask for it, they're never going to use it. And so that's like number one. I've built enough tools in my life where I was like, no, this is really cool. Just do it here. And they're like, no, I hired you to do it. I'm like, I didn't need a tool. So there's that. Second, talking about Discord. So you guys are in Unreal, and blueprints are probably most designy friendly thing I think that they've got for Unreal. I bet it's been a minute since I've actually had to build a blueprint out, but I bet you still have to buck engineers pretty often. For Discord, since it's a shared DOM, right? It's HTML, not HTML, it's a web DOM. And so the tech, you can write an activity as it could just be HTML, some sort of canvas element or WebGL, which is what most people are doing. A lot of people are using Unity to build WebGL, which, God love them. Fight that battle. I'm done fighting that battle. But 3JS is what we're using as the renderer. We built our own engine around the 3JS renderer. And when I said build an engine, it's audio, asset flow, data driven, all the stuff that you have to like, simple little web. So yeah, the tools that we put together is that all the tools they come out of a web DOM, right? So it's like we actually have an editor that looks a lot like a low rent Unity editor, but it's in the web and they can just load things up. They can import their models there. They can do all their tweaks there. All the animations run. It actually can run game simulation code and get a tick. So it can actually simulate some of that and then get their environment set. This is more for the artists and things like that. But even for game designers to be able to come into the orthographic camera and lay out elements, know exactly where it's supposed to be, and then put that together. So that's a long way to say that I really like to build tools in the engine because I hate having to, unless you've got a really good data pipeline to flow from where someone can commit data and then inject it into your game. And that way also they could say, I made it work the way I want to on my computer. And then you can walk over and just click save, export the file. And now you've got to.
One of the things that I think about a lot, I think there's some level of difference of where are you building the game and who's your target customer and what platforms are they on. But one of the things that we've thought a lot about on a future looking basis and thinking about building games is that we always talk about frame budgets when you think about games. Hey, here's how long it should take to render a frame. Here's how fast something should happen. When you start introducing generative AI, you have two sort of challenges. One is LLMs are not necessarily tuned for real-time game latency. And LLMs, if you're running them on the server, is great, but that server cost that is then competing with your game server costs and your platform server costs, right? And that usually has a budget. Or if you're trying to run it locally, then you're taking up GPU time, which is also often used for rendering all the frames. So as you think about adding this technology, which if we live in the world where it is adding sufficient player value and game value to want to do it, how do you start approaching the challenge of, well, I was already working under pretty tight frame budgets and server budgets and all the other kinds of budgets. Now I need to find room for this thing. How do you start taking apart that problem and attacking it?
That's a great question. And I want to remind you, I'm in web world now. So my ego had to take a huge hit on what my render budgets are. a 7-year-old Android device running Discord with an iframe. I think right now, especially in 2025, where it's going to change pretty soon because at GDC, we were supposed to be part of Qualcomm. Qualcomm is pushing really hard to get LLM on chip. They're not the only ones. Apple's been going after it too. Everyone's going after it. And so there's going to be a world in a couple of years from now where we're going to be able to not have to make a network call to do some of this. I don't know. Storage is cheap, so I guess, I don't know, it's a couple gigabytes between friends. Yeah, I think we're in this spot right now to where doing it on device ourselves right now is embeddings you can do, like an inference model you can do pretty well. Like that's been solved. I mentioned the Numenta's got like a great thing that runs on CPU, so you don't even have to chip into your GPU budget. There's other GPU on device. So yeah, I think you need to figure out like where and when you need to pull the trigger on actually generating a completion. Like where and when can you hide it? Can you, through some loading screen, can you get 7 or 8 things already queued up based on previous state that you're going to show in the next scene? Is there places that you can hide it where they're not going to care about the frame rate dropping to 1 frame per second because it's on the loading screen anyway? So yeah, I think there's places that you can hide it. If you need to have, it's World of Warcraft, but it's only you and every NPC is generated, I think you maybe need to look at like Wii graphics, get your budgets down to where rendering the entire scene graph is like maybe 3 milliseconds. That way if you're going for 16.6 milliseconds per frame if you're going for 60 frames per second, right? So yeah, try to get your scene graph down to the 3 or 4 millisecond range so that you can leave the rest open for audio and generate completion. Or just go to 15 frames per second. Adjust, and that's going to make every technical artist and art director cry to hear that. But yeah, that's the fight you just have to have is, hey, we can have this either be like magical with infinity on one side, or it can be the sexiest, awesome, most beautiful thing ever that's just a bunch of statues because we don't have any room to animate it.
Yeah. The eternal push and pull of game development.
So fun, too, because 2 years ago, I don't think I would have ever thought of, man, my memory budget, my render budget, and now my AI budget. That wouldn't have been.
I want to go back a little bit again on scale. I keep thinking, playing that role of you that week getting zerged by kids in Discord. How do you track that is behaving the right way once it's in production? Like you were switching between a bunch of LLMs. How do you know they're doing and saying the right things? Are you running like evals on the fly? Do you have like your own tests? How do you say, oh, this is a right latency? Because we're not in the on-device world clearly yet. What are the metrics that you care about? What were the tools you had to build to monitor? And how is, in the monitoring side, how is that SERG defense system looking like?
Highly inelegant. Remember, this was the team not sleeping, not expecting this. And it was a lot of curls and postman calls and downloading MP3s to hear what it sounded like, realizing that I haven't spoken Portuguese since 2002, so probably rusty. Not a lot of tooling, a lot of brute force of postman. Of the game is React.js with 3.js. There was a lot of just running localhost and hitting it yourself to see what you. That game was 100% peer-to-peer. We've since then evolved the Playroom Kit, which is our tech stack, to be peer-to-peer, host authoritative, and then server authoritative, what the last show is. But since that was like all peer-to-peer, like depending on who was technically the host of the game, they were the one making calls from the browsers. It was a lot of live fire exercises of running localhost. Yeah, I wish I had a better answer for you other than it was a lot of, did it work? Did we get something back? That's good enough. Go.
Any tools that you end up building after things stabilize a little bit?
Not specifically for Death by AI, but then for all of our games coming out, because we've got 2 games that are about to release. Last Show is coming up, and then we have Banana of Doom that's going to follow maybe a month or 2 later. And so the tooling all went into them, and like really, we try to just keep a live ops of Death by AI going as much as we could. We released a season 2 of content in, I want to say it was September, that drove the numbers back up. It was new deaths, new modes, a bunch of new avatars that could be murdered. It was pretty fun. But really, we took that game as, okay, this was an accidental smash success for us. We're lit in these next games. Now we know what we're in store for. Hopefully we're in store for again. And the tools have been built for the new game, forward facing, and we backport whatever we can when it makes sense.
When you think about the games coming out and you have the history of death by AI and you have the live ops going on and probably some duct tape and bubblegum dashboards and alerts and whatever else. But as you think about launching these games, you're gearing up to hopefully hit the same level of success, or maybe not, depending on how much you want sleep over the next couple months. What does that sort of, now that you have the experience of death by AI and you're looking at these upcoming games, what are the big things on that dashboard? What are the alerts set up for? What are the things that are top of mind for you to track to understand, hey, the game is in a healthy state. Players are going to be having a good time. Like, yeah, I don't need to hit the emergency. Okay, everyone wake up, all hands on deck button yet, right? Like how are you thinking about that stuff for those upcoming games?
Yeah, that's good. Let me give you the top level, then we can drill in a little bit. So our top level thinking is that Death by AI proved to us that there is an appetite for games that have an AI generative. We thought we were on the right track, and then after 65 million players, you're like, yeah, I think that's probably the right track. So now it's less of these bets of will it work, can it work, and now it's okay, can we refine it and make it a smoother experience or edgier experience, and also keep it novel, because going back to the top of the podcast when we talked about Skyrim, like that got old real quick. So you want to make sure that you've got something that isn't going to get old real quick and have mechanics in there that the dashboards and the tooling that we've put together is a lot more like traditional of player retention. What are they doing? How many actions are they taking per minute? What actions are they taking on? Which ones, where are they dropping off? They do an action and then they just drop out of the game. What was that? The second piece is, okay, was it a technical failure? Because we're capturing all of this and all this state. So we can go back and re-roll it, replay it, and capture it. We have the completion captured. So it's, oh, this in Yiddish just told them that their grandmother is doing a terrible thing. Okay, that's why this player dropped. They were just insulted by it. Most of the time, though, it's going to be like those latency things you're talking about, where someone tried, and people are expecting some latency, especially if if you put in, you try to hide it behind transition screens, you try to hide it behind, not loading screens and spinners, but you try to hide it behind the experience. But even that's going to fail. Maybe something just lagged out. Maybe something that just took forever. So that's the tooling and dashboards we're looking at now is what are they doing? And if we lose them any point in the funnel of the game, where did we lose them? And then try to figure out why we lost them. Maybe the audio was just terrible. Maybe we switched models. And every time we switch models, that's when we see a huge influx of traffic. It's really strange. People don't even know we switch models. But the moment you switch models, someone gets a different, maybe completely broken experience. They tell all their friends, and it's like that whole thing of, God, this tastes awful. Here, try it. Like, everyone will jump on and try, because then it's a really crazy experience.
Yeah.
So that's the tooling and the metrics we're looking at.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely goes back to novelty and how novelty not wearing off, or even like that experience of seeing something broken in a way you've never seen it before. I'm sure many people have downloaded Skyrim when they saw a new bug of someone doing something broken in Skyrim. They're like, oh, now I want to play Skyrim.
Right.
If we sort of transition here towards the later part of the interview on a little bit of a looking forward, obviously you guys have a couple games imminent. As we're recording this, GDC is next week. When you look forward over the next year or two and the developments that are happening in generative AI and in machine learning, as well as all the normal game stuff, what are things that you're both potentially looking forward to, or what sort of technical advances do you feel would make a huge difference for you in your life, building not just the games that are coming out over the next couple months, but the ones coming out at the end of this year or the beginning of next?
Yeah. Let's talk about the tooling first, and then I can go into, because I've got pretty rosy, starry eyes to the future right now. Tooling, I'm really excited about. Right now, pretty much everyone on the team is using a form of AI as their duck. You guys familiar with the coding duck? Luckily, everyone on our team is definitely mid or higher. I'm pretty senior. I think using a co-pilot of some kind, ChatGPT or Perplexity or whatever you're using, to help you think about logic and try to build things faster and better. highly recommend every junior engineer out there, including the ones that say they're a senior engineer, all you juniors, don't use this, because the internet has been trained on junior code. And so when you ask it how to do something, it's going to give you junior results. It might give you good logic, but it's going to give you bad code. So you have to be able to read what it's giving you and know, okay, I see what it was going for. I could do it like this. Don't use what it printed out because that's garbage. But I know what it was getting onto, and it might get you to a cleaner, faster result. Then it's going to be really hard to debug because you don't know why you wrote the code you wrote. New tools coming online might help the unit testing, catching failures faster. I know GitHub's put a whole bunch of time and money into building tools to do testing on the fly as you do your commits. I think that's really exciting. So anything that can keep the error rate down. I'm not a big fan of generated art for final production art. My art director, Bill Robinson, who's an amazing artist, he was a little sad that I showed him some generated art when I was trying to tell him what I wanted. He was like, "Are we friends still? What is this?" And after a week of me showing him things that I had just had ChatGPT or whatever make for me, he said, "Okay, I now see this as a useful tool because I can't draw a straight line. I'm horribly anti-artistic, but I can use it to get to the gist of what I'm looking for, and then he can go make the art for real." And that's been that pipeline there. So I think that getting vision across tooling, I'm really excited to see what, even the stuff I haven't thought of yet, or none of us have thought of yet, what's coming next tooling wise. So what I'm looking forward to, this is a little bit about AI, but it really is about games. And the industry is not in a great spot as of right now. There's a lot of turnover and layoffs and things, but it's an ebb and flow. I think that it's going to come back nice and strong. But one of the things I'm really excited about is that, and why I like Discord activities, once again, this sounds like a commercial for Discord, is that getting back to web gaming. And what I mean by that is nothing to install, no plugins, and no runtimes. It just works. And that was how I cut my teeth in the late 90s in games, making stuff for Cartoon Network and Adult Swim was all either web or Flash. The budgets on those games were really small, but you could do really cool stuff. You could get a lot of really experimental, fun stuff. And the stuff Adult Swim put out, I'm biased, but funniest things that have ever been made on the planet. And because you could make it fast, you could turn it over quickly, and the risk was incredibly small. Having spent the past decade in mobile, getting people to install a mobile game is impossible. People will not do it unless it's some sort of tentpole title that they've heard of that have been around for years. The PC market is also, it's better than mobile for sure, but it's also very difficult. You have to get someone to install something. So this return to form, the commitment on someone trying your game being almost zero, of just clicking start and then it just shows up. And then being able to be a lot more experimental, smaller teams and faster turnaround times. I'm really excited about that. And the whole AI aspect to it, it's a gimmick, but it's also a new way of making games. And I think that web fertile playground, kind of mirroring the Adult Swim days, is where we're going to find that real, like, retail made. Like, that game could not have been made 5 years ago. The design couldn't even have been thought of 5 or 6 years ago. And like those experimental bets of like really interesting small teams turning things around quickly, I'm really excited about it. I think that we can get some emergent game designs that couldn't have existed. Like, it's coming. It's just one more turn of the crank and we'll be like, we can do next. And now we've got Cybertron versus whatever. You guys make it.
Perfect. Finally, I'm curious if you would have any viewpoint on, we've talked a lot about what does it mean for AI to come into games and how to navigate that as we're building games. But I'm curious for the flip side of what would you advocate for all the folks at, whether they're at OpenAI or at Stanford or all those machine learning folks, what they should be learning from us here in games, and especially as we apply a lot of this generative AI stuff into games and build experiences, what do you hope goes back into that discipline of engineering?
That's a good one. Since these guys are on the bleeding edge of what's coming next, I want them to get away from stuff that no one's asking for yet. Like last night, I was falling asleep. I had Futurama on, and I love Futurama. There was the first episode with the what if box or the what if machine. The joke, he like made a really long finger and turned it on. But yeah, you just said what if, and then it would show you a whole movie about what if. And that seems to be like where OpenAI is really like, oh, we're going to generate video. We're going to do these giant what ifs where you just say Godzilla versus Batman and you get a full movie from it. And I think it's really cool. But come on, guys, let's get LLMs and the tech working in much more, for games at least, in ways where the outcomes can not only be predicted, but that we can maintain control over the outcomes without having to do all the crazy stuff that the three of us know very well that you have to do. Of being nice to the AI and telling it it's pretty and then asking for something horrible. Because if you tell it it's pretty, then it will do the horrible thing. It gets around the safety protocols, right? I really wish that they would focus more on use cases of controlling this fire hose of information and not just jumping onto the shiny thing of, wouldn't it be great if we didn't have actors anymore? Yeah, okay, calm down, everyone. Let's just make something cool that's controllable.
Sure. I really appreciate you coming on and joining us and spending the time. I wanted to ask if there were any sort of like closing thoughts, closing things that you wanted to end the episode and the topic with, give you the floor for a final statement of the episode.
No, this is a lot of fun. I love talking about this stuff. And this is also a respite from the layers and layers of bugs I've been trying to quash before the GDC demos that are happening in 73 hours. I'm looking forward to, I know that the game industry is in a weird spot right now. I have a bunch of friends that are out of work, but I also think that now is the best time for 4 people to get together and try to make something. You just do it out on your own. The tools are here. AI can help you get to certain places faster, different frameworks. Like we've, as I mentioned, we have a Playroom kit. Like you can go to our website. Anyone can use it. Lots of frameworks out there. There's one you could use if you wanted. I'm really looking forward to this GDC and seeing what else is there. We're going to be all over it. As I said, the last show is about to launch, and then we've got Banana of Doom right behind. I'm looking forward to seeing what everyone else has. We went through 2 GDCs full of crypto games, and I'm really excited to see, okay, what about now? I'm sure the crypto guys are still going to be there, and they've got some cool stuff to show. But I'm really curious to see what else is forward thinking. I think this is going to be a really good show. I think there's going to be a lot of cool stuff to see.
Yeah, I definitely am looking forward to seeing all the stuff that comes out of it. As a final thing, if anyone was listening and they really appreciated an answer or wanted to follow up with a follow-up question, what's the easiest way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, I re-entered social media 2015, late 2015. I got rid of all of it. I am Tim of the North on Blue Sky.
Welcome back.
Thank you. It's a weird place.
Yes, Blue Sky is better than most, but it is all still very weird. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode. We really appreciate you tuning in. And thank you so much, Tim, for joining us and sharing your experiences with us. Thanks for listening to the full episode. We really hope you enjoyed the discussion. It would help us out a ton if you subscribed to the show on your platform of choice, as well as shared it with folks you think would find it useful. You can always check out playingwithinference.com to get in contact with us, join our Discord, or just find the links to the episodes. See you next week.